Still muted on Zoom.
You're live.
You unmute us. Good morning, welcome to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. It's 9:08 a.m. My name is Ty Mentor, Chair of the Board. To my left is the Vice Chair, Commissioner Gary Edwards. To my right is Sarah DeBell, who is sitting in as the Executive Assistant for Commissioner Mejia, who will be, we believe, joining in by Zoom. She has an excuse this morning. County Manager Mary Chavez and Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell are with us. The topic for the morning is a budget work session. The public can follow along on the YouTube, Thurston County YouTube channel. We have an hour, but it'll bleed into a Commissioner's check-in, so I think there's probably some flexibility there if we need it. So I guess I'll turn to Robin and lay out what we're trying to accomplish today.
I think Romero wants to open.
Yeah, and thank you, Commissioners. This is a part of the budget development process, and Commissioner Mason and Commissioner Edwards have already gone through this process. And this is really a work session, an opportunity for you to bring your budget priorities. And any ideas that you would like to consider as you debate the 2022-2023 budget. At this point, I encourage you not to debate the validity of each of the items that you would like to bring forth. That debate will be part of your priorities when you debate and you set priorities across all the county requests that you might be receiving as part of the budget. Today is for us to understand the Commissioner's budget priorities. And the next step is the staff will take all those priorities and we'll put dollars and cents associated with those priorities that you have. And those will be brought to you in the fall as part of the regular conversation. So this is really an open conversation for you to have. Robin is gonna go to the whiteboard. He's gonna start taking notes and it's gonna be an interesting conversation.
Right, so what we'll do is we'll just kind of go around and I'll ask, like we can start with Commissioner Edwards. What's one thing you're interested that you hope to see in the budget next year? And we'll just go one by one. Romero and I will also have an opportunity to put something on the board. And as he said, no decisions to make or today, and ultimately what you put on the board today might not get funded depending on what you choose to fund this fall and what our capacity is, but we want to make sure it's on the table to get considered.
As an example, I voted against one of my own priorities that I asked once I saw the full sort of budget picture and didn't feel like we had quite enough money to do it. So I asked for it to be on there, but then I voted against it.
That's exactly right.
So
If you've got an idea where we might fund it from, we'd be happy to take that. But one of the things staff will do is find the best funding source for your ideas. If this is something that would belong in an office or department, we'll work with that organization to make sure it's in that part of the budget. But whatever you put on the board today will come forward in some form this fall. So that's the plan. And Commissioner Edwards, what's something that you would like to have to consider in October?
And we can come back.
Oh, yeah.
We just back and forth,
That's
okay.
fine.
You don't have to,
on the
say
spot.
everything all at once.
We're doing it old school on the whiteboard.
if you think of it Tuesday, that's good, okay too.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
I guess I'd start out with paving and road infrastructure upkeep, I guess.
Road maintenance.
Road maintenance might be a better way to put it. And are you gonna solely come up with, you and your team, are you gonna come up with the whole funding mechanism? Do we need to think about like REIT 1 and REIT 2 and different things like that? I mean, I'd like to know what the breakdown is that's available as we start these discussions. I mean, do we have X number of dollars from sales tax. We got extra sales tax, for an
Right.
example.
Right,
So, I'd like to know the breakdowns of our revenue that's coming in and what we're projected for this upcoming budget cycle versus the last budget cycle.
Right.
And any downturn or upturn.
so you will have all that information as you launch into budget deliberations. One of the things we do every year is the board reviews every fund's financial plan and how budget proposals fit into it. And you have an opportunity then to say, well, hey, can't we use this or can't we use that? But like, let's take road maintenance and preservation as an example. After this meeting, your budget team will get a hold of Jennifer Walker and Karen Weiss at Public Works, and we'll say, okay, the board is interested in seeing this in the budget, what might that look like?
And I don't want anything that I'm bringing up here, construed as I'm unhappy with the way it is.
Oh,
Because
no.
they've got a pretty good plan, but I do think that infrastructure is key to continuing to, for government to function, the community get to work, all of
Right.
those type of things.
Right.
And even, I know we've talked a little bit about working with the tribe, and there's kind of a national push for ability for our, our social media infrastructure, the broadband or internet availability, or like, I'm finally supposedly gonna have cell service out around my place, which would be nice. It's supposed to go online on the 25th of this month.
It was just a few days. Who's
Wow.
providing
Right. I mean, it's only something I've been working on for about 5 years.
Right,
Just so you don't think that things happen too quickly.
Right.
So I appreciate
Long
the-
road on that one.
the note, none of what any of you come up with is a criticism of what the county is
Yeah,
currently doing.
yeah.
This is, what could we do better? What do you wanna see more of? What's something that you're interested in that you'd like to have on the
So
table?
what I'm
Because
hearing is broadband, that he would like.
Mhm.
broadband as
Yeah,
well,
but
yeah.
I don't know if that's gonna entail us or us coordinating with the Port of Olympia or with,
All that,
All
you know,
that.
we'll
with the tribe.
work out the details.
we'll
This
work out
is
details.
just what do you want
I just
to
think
see.
it's important to deal with our changing situation, whether
Right.
that's education or work. Cause I just don't think we know where we're at yet. That's-
And for broadband, this is also a great example. On road maintenance preservation, we're gonna work with the Public Works team and get you a proposal. It might be funded through the road fund or REIT 2 or whatever mechanism. We'll come up with a proposal for you, and then it's up to you to move it around or ask questions. With broadband, when I put that on the list, I'm going to recommend that we use the American Recovery Plan funding, because that's
And
available.
the coordination with the tribe and the state has
Right.
already started. Jenica and I have been working on this.
Right.
So the
This is
tribe,
a BAT, broadband access team.
Right.
exactly, so the Nisqually tribe is gonna be submitting a proposal to the board for you to consider ARP funds. So it aligns to that perspective, so.
Right, and,
Yeah.
and the state has money, and so we'll have ideas on what we can tap into to fund these things when they come back to you. So Commissioner Menzer, what are you interested in?
Okay, well, a couple preliminary comments in case people are watching and curious where I'm coming from. I went through almost 2 years without getting to do this because I walked in with a biennial budget and we didn't set one until last fall. But last fall, my two biggest priorities were, I got majority of the board support for the criminal justice program manager and the climate funding. So I'm very happy with that. The things that I have on my list at this point are they're all kind of maybes, in the sense that and I'm not considering the ARPA funds, really. I'm thinking, I mean, I know the board will address that and that will be fleshed out. I don't need to feel like I need to push priorities amongst, I'm not personally thinking about that money. I'm thinking about other things that might not get pushed otherwise. So with those caveats, my first maybe placeholder, I'll call it, is I'm going to ask staff, I would like to have a situation where shoreline septic have to file a renewable operational certificate. I want that to be so I'm gonna ask staff to put a dollar amount on what's the minimum amount, the absolute minimum amount it would cost to administer something like that. And I would like a placeholder of that for whatever that, because I don't really want to increase fees or tax people about it. I don't think it'll be necessary, frankly. But I'd like to see what the capacity is, what that number is, and whatever that looks at, I'd like to see that, as a placeholder to consider.
Cool.
I think we're close to getting there. I think we can get there by fall.
We will be addressing that in the upcoming briefing on the follow-up to we already had on the septics.
Yeah, I think it's
So,
not gonna be the big full implementation of the state's management plan. It's gonna be a stripped down administering certificate requirement that state law already requires for a limited number of septic owners that are connected to surface waters. So that's.
to put dollars and cents, we'll reach out to public health.
Yep.
And
We'll work with
start
public health.
brewing this.
And again, I may not decide to do it once I see what that costs and what the dollar sources are, but I'd at least like that to be stuck in there in case we can get there.
Great. Sarah, what on behalf of?
Before we move to Sarah, you talked about the climate mitigation plan. The question that I have is, the board approved last year 300,000, and we have already used that. Would you like to continue some sort of level of funding?
So let's bring that on his next turn.
Okay.
No,
No, because he addressed the climate mitigation.
Right.
Climate's
We'll
next
go
on
for
my
that.
list, so
So-
we can take it over.
All right. Commissioner
Okay.
Mejia.
Commissioner Mejia's first priority is to fully fund JASCOM. She's collecting data on the need in our community for this, and she has support from Sheriff Snaza and the JASCOM board for this proposal. And her thinking is that county residents should be getting the same service as city residents, and where you live should not impact the services that you receive.
Great. Fully
We
funded.
all know
and-
about, that was
Yeah.
the one I proposed and voted against last year. So the
Right.
board's aware, yeah. That's
Great,
a
great.
good one to keep in our minds.
For the
Yeah.
public, JASCOM is our animal services. Yep. All right.
Okay,
Before you go, Commissioner Edwards, Romero, do you have anything you'd like to put up?
Yes, you will see a request that I ask pretrial services to bring that to have a program manager to manage the hub that we're implementing here in Building 4, the resource hub. There's a need to have somebody to overlook on that. I have worked with Patrick and John Thunheim, and we're gonna be presenting this proposal to the TST tomorrow to see if they can probably fund that. So that is a proposal.
Great.
I'm sorry, I missed the very first thing you said.
Program manager
Okay.
for the resource hub.
All right, I'm going to put up that I hope that the board funds a leave buyout pool, and we're working with HR you've seen a preview of that, we're working to refine it. Okay, Commissioner Edwards.
we've talked a little bit, and I know we've got a briefing coming up in the near future about water quality with our lakes. So, I mean, that's a pretty broad undertaking, if you will. I mean, you could think of it from Commissioner Mentzer's position on water and septic and that type of thing. What the Lake Management District people are proposing, I think makes sense to promote that type of partnership with all the lakes if possible.
The interfund issue.
Yeah, so that we're not discouraging creation of those lake management districts. And in fact, we are helping them deal with water issues in their individual lakes. And I know a lot of times that's, well, they live on the lake. Well, everybody utilizes the lakes. That's where I'm coming from. That it becomes a benefit. It's one of the jewels of our community is the lake recreation activity that is available to us. And it's pretty sad now with water quality, and I think we should do what we can do. I will say on septic, for an example, I know we went through it years ago. It wasn't septics, it was lawn fertilizer, it was other things. And the gentleman that came in from Black Lake, it seems like they found that same thing when they did their study. So, but why is there fecal chloroform coming in 3 creeks, So is it a homeless camp up there? They always bring that up, I mean, is it, or is it a defective septic system up there? I mean, I think we need to get to the bottom of those type of things, but then address other underlying things to clean up our lake quality where we can. And as far as drainage, we all live in a drainage. So some places it's draining into a lake, and it goes into the river, and it goes into the saltwater, so you could be 10 miles from water and still be in the drainage. So we just have to figure out what is adversely impacting water. So that's, I don't have a budgetary position on it, that we need X number of dollars, but I think it's a priority. And everything we do doesn't have to cost a lot of money, I don't think. It can still be beneficial, to the community and to the environment.
Right.
So, and are we automatically just getting rid of these? I mean, we do have legislative liaison, economic development coordinator.
Those were examples of.
Yeah, but I mean,
things that
some
have
of
been
these
on
are
the
still
board in
very
the past.
relevant.
Yeah.
Well, and if you wanna consider them
Yeah,
this fall,
okay.
and we haven't done them or
I mean, I don't wanna
not
give
done
up
enough.
on fish passages, for an example.
Right, right.
That is an ongoing program. The board has already continued to support that, but you can emphasize that as part of your priorities. That's
Right.
Well, I mean, I
We
don't
can
know that
highlight
we
it.
can afford to do much more than we're doing, but I think by starting the process early, even before there was any kind of mandate from the court or anything, we got our foot in the door and we could say, hey, we're already doing this. Give us a hand,
We've seen some
Seed
amazing
money.
success,
Yeah.
and it has leveraged money.
Right.
So
Yeah.
going back to the water quality in the lakes, may I paraphrase your suggestion?
Sure. Yeah.
You would like to maybe create a program to study the water quality in the lakes in the county?
No, not necessarily that. I want to assist those areas that could create a process, very much like Long Lake, Lawrence Lake, some degree Black Lake. We can encourage citizens to do that by not taking half of their lake management money towards the overhead of operating their process. We're giving them maybe a benefit on runoff. I think stormwater, they get some kind of a tax break on.
Yeah, 50%.
Yeah, so it's something, but I don't know if it equates. I just want to spend more effort. I don't know if that 50% reduction in stormwater fees equates to the reality of solving a problem or not.
But we could propose something like, for the board to start to consider and then shape. So just off the top of my head, waive the $5,000 bond to have it established.
Right.
put seed money in to get it started, like an initial 10,000 in the bank and
The interfund.
replace the interfund. Yeah.
Yeah,
Any
he's-
interfund
that's
cost
By
is
encouraging
offset.
those districts, I think Commissioner's saying, keep using Black Lake example, like when they're robust, then they do things like study their own lake problems, and we get that information without the county having to do it, because we've encouraged their capacity.
There.
Right.
That's what you're
Those are
saying,
just
right?
Yes, that's
three
right.
So those
small
three
things.
elements, that'll be
Yeah.
perfect.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
an idea.
I mean, we
and
have to
can work
start
with that.
somewhere, and just by encouraging, doing whatever we can do as a government entity to encourage citizens, because I really think that was the intent of the legislation when it was put together 40 years ago. It was intended to encourage communities to try to solve problems, not just depend on government, but to get those communities involved. And I don't know, there's
Right.
probably peer pressure
So we
about,
could work
hey, how come
with
your
Public
lawn's so
Works
green right
and
down to
throw
the
something
water?
together.
If
I
you're
mean,
getting
that was-
taxed to solve a problem, taxed by your own community,
Yeah,
solve a problem that you're contributing to, yeah, then
you're less likely
well,
to.
you're more likely to ask your neighbor,
Yeah.
hey,
That's right.
I don't really like to pay all this money because the lake's fouled up because you're using too much fertilizer. Why don't we
Yeah.
do something? I mean, it encourages those conversations, I guess, and collaboration amongst communities.
I want the community to work on their problems. I don't see government as the sole answer to many things. And I think if we encourage citizen groups to get together and create their own districts under the law, why not do that and see if we can't benefit water quality?
Okay, so that one's clear, right?
Yep,
All right, then I'll go to climate. My ask was gonna be basically another maybe placeholder for, Mayor and I have talked about whether or not the implementation of the plan is gonna require a staffing component. Jenica, I know, is working on sort of a look at what strategies are gonna require staffing and kind of trying to assess that for us. I think Romero and I both have said to each other that it's probable we're gonna need a staffing component, and so if that turns out to be true, I want that as a placeholder, whatever you wanna call it, a climate coordinator or something to make sure we have the staffing to meet the obligations under the plan.
and this would be instead of additional support for TRPC to provide the staffing?
No, so your question was about the 300 and ongoing. I mean, I understood that was kind of not necessarily one time, but it wasn't that we were deciding we're gonna spend 300,000 every year. That's not what we were deciding. We were deciding we're gonna commit this amount of money. We're gonna see how far that money goes. I won't be shy to ask for additional money if it turns out we have to have it, but at this point, I'm not asking for anything like that. We've only spent, I think, the only thing we spent out of the 300,000 is the
Phase
amount
three.
for the phase 3, which was
Yeah.
44,000.
And for building next year's budget, we are carrying over
Over.
the amount that we don't think has been spent.
Yeah, so I'm fully
Right.
comfortable with that, as long as we leave open the possibility of asking for a staffing, if Jenica and
So
we
let's
decide
just have
it's-
that as a climate coordinator.
Yeah,
As a
just,
request, yeah.
and again, we may not need it, but it's
Yes.
possible we do. So that's where, does that answer your question about the climate
Yep.
issue? Okay.
My turn?
All right, yep.
Okay, so Commissioner Mejia's second priority is an agriculture coordinator liaison. And in our recent ag survey, a coordinator is one of the steps that the county could take to support our local ag economy. And according to a recent land policy report by the National Young Farmers Coalitions, they have 3 policy recommendations: create local climate resiliency land banks, rethinking agricultural land as public infrastructure and farmers as critical employees, establish increased funding for local farmland protection programs, and encourage innovative land use planning and zoning amendments to limit development on prime agricultural soils, prioritize agricultural land use, and enable access for farmers. So Commissioner Mejia's thought is that we need someone to be looking closely at how we support farmers. And during the pandemic, we saw how important it is to protect our local food source. And the only way to do that is by supporting farmers.
Great. Agriculture coordinator, liaison.
Yep.
All right.
Mayor's turn.
I'd like to suggest that we invest in training. I'm not really focused on the commissioner's office training. I think it's encourage office and departments for training. And that, I believe, by itself is going to be an incentive to retain employees, because systematically we have not invested in training. We send to training and we expect to absorb training within the allocated budget.
Good.
I am gonna put something kind of accounting geeky on the board, and that is the need to address cash flow in the Parks Fund. And what this would be is a one-time transfer of general fund money so that there's a sustainable fund balance, rather than them either being in the red all the time. This would not create additional funding for parks, it would just stabilize the fund.
As we move forward here, I'm not stating these as priorities 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Absolutely not,
I'm
no.
just throwing out issues.
You'll have an opportunity to
Yeah.
prioritize them later.
So, I would like to see, and this is a big ask, I'd like to see us get off the bottom rung of the ladder when it comes to the number of deputy sheriffs per 1,000 population served that we have. Because right now, we're at the bottom of the ladder. So what does that mean? Well, what can we afford? This is something, I guess, this comes from being old again, because I've seen the whole thing go through the process where budgets were tightened up, and when I worked back east, eventually it got to where you had 2-man cars. And the reason you had 2-man cars is because you had less violence if you had 2 officers there or 4 officers there. It's very much like a municipal operation versus the state patrol. Right now, a state patrolman stops somebody out in rural America, he's all by himself, he better learn discretion, be able to handle himself properly, and the perpetrator might try to take some kind of defensive action, more likely against him as a single officer than if there's a backup there, or if there's 2 officers, or if there's tools available, or if you're on camera. You know, a lot of what ifs play into it. So it isn't all bodies, sometimes it's equipment and other things. But I do want to get that number of officers per population served closer to what the municipalities have. Closer.
Understood.
So I have deputy sheriffs better than the bottom county.
Well, because
Right.
I can't tell you exactly, but I think we're right there at the bottom.
Well, we can work with the sheriff's office and our new criminal justice coordinator to figure out how many that might be. All right, Commissioner Menzer?
Okay, I'll just state that the 2 I've said are kind of my 2 big things. And at this point, there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about, but they may come up in department asks, like you say, I don't know, I mean,
Right.
just for example, I want to make sure that we address the court backlog. I don't know, I don't exactly know what that, I'm assuming the different departments are gonna make requests, so I don't know that we need to put it up there.
We already have a
We
number.
we have a number. I'm working with the offices and departments that are impacted. We are gonna bring you a
Okay, so
proposal on the
scratch that, because I know it's
ARP fund.
covered.
Yep, it
Here's-
is totally covered.
Here's something that's probably covered too, but I am gonna throw it out here, for Public Works. The gaps in civil engineers and stormwater, engineers. We need at least 2, and that's gotta be, and I'm hoping that's one of Jennifer's top priorities, but if it's not, it's gonna be one of mine.
The public works are going to be submitting that.
Okay,
It's okay if we think they might be turning it in. If it gets on this board, we'll make sure it's there.
okay, then I'll go with
It's,
that.
I think additional stormwater engineers.
Right. Sarah?
Okay. The last priority that I have for Commissioner Mejia is that she's hoping we can get a pathologist for the coroner's office. She's hoping it would be a 3/4 position. This would save the county money in the long run to have a pathologist on staff for counties nearby to contract with Thurston for services. It's getting harder to contract out these services because of the demand for pathologists and the lack of supply of people in that profession. So if we had a pathologist on staff, we wouldn't have to struggle to contract out these services.
Maybe related, somewhat related to what you outlined in the parks, but I think we may need to look at park staffing levels. And it seems in the last few years, and even at the board level, we have discussed the lack of park staff to maintain what this beautiful park system that we have. Commissioner Mejia asked how many acres do we have yesterday? 2,800 acres. There's a lot of opportunities for us to provide additional recreation to our citizens. And unfortunately, with the 5 staff that we have, it's not feasible or practical. So
I'm gonna pass.
The fair, I think we set aside, didn't we set aside $250,000 to work towards the fair? But I wanna accomplish that goal of building a more user-friendly building that will turn the fair activity on its off time into, I don't know if you wanna, I mean, we're not in the business of making money, but at least cover expenses that are incurred by the fair. If we could rent out that building they are talking about developing, and that's from the fair board, to where it becomes really usable and it becomes a venue for a lot of different activities that bring in revenue to offset the cost of the fair. So
Right.
that's,
perfect timing.
Yep.
I talked to Josh yesterday, and we're gonna bring to the board more details about that project. So, yes.
Yep, good. Commissioner Menzer?
Well, since Jazz Common Parks already got covered by my colleagues here, those are both possibles on my list, and we talked about court system. The only 2 things I had, one is, again, just the LEAD program. I don't know if the grant funding runs out at some point. I wanna make sure we continue to support that, because I think it's gonna be successful and it's gonna be a really huge thing to show the community we're addressing. What I hear everywhere I go is, what are we doing about mental health? What are we doing about reducing police involvement? What are we doing about getting our jail to not be a mental health hospital? So I think we're good with LEAD at the moment, but I think that the state is plugging a gap there that may not go forever.
Yep.
So if that happens, then I would ask for board support on that. And that's basically it on my list. I mean, I know there's racial equity training or something. There may be things related to our racial equity action plan that, but that's at this point kind of unclear what that is, so.
But we're looking ahead for the next 2 years, so
Oh, next
that's
2 years.
important. We wanna get
Okay.
it up here.
Well, I'll hit that on the next round.
All right.
When I'm done.
I don't have anything more for Commissioner Mejia.
All right?
Commissioner Mejia is gonna highlight the training for racial equity. So
Okay.
I leave that for him to make that recommend. And just to let you know, today, we're holding interviews to select the racial equity program manager, the board authorized.
I would just put action plan up there, Robin, because I know training was identified and I know support for a council, it was in there. So those are kind of two different things, but I'd like to put under the umbrella of implementation of our action plan that we're still working on.
Racial equity implementation.
And thank you for reminding me that this is like 2 years worth of thought process, because
Yeah.
I was locked in the 1 year thinking from last year.
Right, think ahead. So something I have heard the board talk about, but is not on this list, so I'm curious, what about code compliance? The mitigation fund for code compliance properties.
I was relying on Josh to bring that forward. I assumed that CPED would.
I thought we did a fund somehow, didn't we do something?
You funded one particular project, but you did not establish an ongoing
We
fund.
didn't establish a fund per se?
Nope.
Did we set aside $50,000 for something?
Just to deal with one issue.
It was a one-time.
Is it one
What
time?
about the one over
property.
by the school? There was some problem over by.
On that one is still coordinated with the school district to see if we can partner with them. The 50,000, and in fact, they just sent an email, they were gonna go ahead and remove that.
If you remember, the proposal was,
100.
they asked for 100, 50 for the one and 50 for the other. And the board basically said, well, we'll go ahead, since LP Brown's still kind of in flux, we're not gonna go ahead and give that 50, we're gonna go ahead and give the 50 for the one that really had the deadline looming and all that. The abatement. But we kind of kicked that can down the road of LP Brown and how to fund whatever abatement ends up being
We
necessary.
will make sure that something comes forward out of CPED. if
Yeah,
that's your-
Josh and I have been talking about it, and I thought that was one of his priorities, so I didn't bother to put
So
on
what I
mine.
would suggest to you is if you want to absolutely see something this fall,
Mhm.
we're on point to make sure that it's in there from somewhere. So
Okay.
we'll just have it on
Well,
the
I'd
list.
definitely like to see
He
that.
may already be working on it, and that's fine.
I believe that the single tree issue, I believe there was a bid for $10,000 to put in, to clean that site up. And then the intent was if the community couldn't pay that bill, that the county would pay it and then put a lien on the property for that 10. That's kind of the last I heard that was going on.
Yeah, we're just along the same lines. The abatement was for the property owner to clean that up. And we don't have any guarantees. The property owner will do so, so the county's gonna step in. And if the county steps in, you're right, we'll put a lien on it.
And then when the property sells, we get our money back.
Correct.
But I think it was 10,000 if I remember.
I don't remember the bid.
I don't know how many bids came in, but I think there was a 10,000.
The only thing that I saw yesterday is the asbestos study has been
I'm
completed.
hoping that that gets accomplished because the judge put a deadline on the order, I thought, when it was issued.
I did ask Scott Cushing to ask for an extension for us to be able to perform the work. So that is moving forward.
Let me put one other thing down, and I don't know where this is gonna fit, but I've been working on this. And it's the problems that we ran into with the 10% on drainage, coverage. You've got a term for it, low impact
Is the low
development.
impact development, the 10% impervious surface,
Right,
that is coming for, this year is coming for you to consider taking an action.
okay, that's, I mean, that's an issue, it
It's
doesn't necessarily.
not
It's
necessarily
not
a
budget.
budgetary, it's more of a
It's not a
code.
budget issue, maybe.
That code is coming.
Is there anything else, Robin, that you think you've heard us talk about that we're not thinking
The
of?
other thing that I just noted that I didn't want to forget is, Commissioner Mejia had talked about an equal rights, a county level equal rights commission, but that might be under this racial equity action plan.
Yeah, the Human Rights Commission
Right,
type
human
thing
rights.
for the county. Yeah, that is also one of her, on the list of our goals that we have. She didn't ask me to talk about it this morning, but I know that that's something that she thinks about.
So I'm gonna kind of attach it to this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna add something that we talked about yesterday during the CIP review, and that is operation costs attached to infrastructure projects, capital projects. And so the example I'm going to give you is we just purchased the Montman property. That becomes a big new workload for facilities. And there's no funding in the budget right now for that. So I'll be bringing forward the request for a facilities person. But we ought to be putting those kinds of things in the budget at the time that you're talking about the capital improvement. Operation related to capital infrastructure.
It's related to that, Robin, and I think you and Jennifer discussed a little bit on the handoff, because this is what we're talking about. It's a handoff from what we build the project to a operations. But I think it will be good for you and Jennifer to explore a formal handoff, meaning a checklist as to what the minimum maintenance requirements for that facility will be. And that will give us a good indication what is the cost that we're gonna be, experiencing, and trying to keep that level of service of maintenance.
Do we have an assessment on that complex about, how long is it gonna be before we need to replace a roof or that kind of thing? Is
yes.
that done yet?
That was part of the assessment when we went to purchase the building,
Yeah,
was
but
the
I mean,
age of the buildings.
Okay, well, it could have been in there, but I mean, are we talking about, we need a roof within 5 years, within 10 years, or what, and kind of what is the total long-term plan for that facility? Is that gonna be kind of what we need for the auditor? And who else is gonna fill that vacancy eventually when I guess we're subleasing to someone temporarily or several someones? Is that right?
Yes, we have to wait for the current leases to
Right.
run their course.
So what's gonna be the move? Who's gonna head into that particular area for those type of
Facilities
activities?
and records.
And you've got that all figured out already for the whole
Well,
square
that was
footage?
part of the conversation we had with you.
It's a 30,000-foot level plan. So we heard Robin yesterday, we know secure the services of an architect. They will help us start defining a specific space.
Okay,
And at
that's
that
all.
point, you will have more information to share with the board on that particular. And I think at that point is when we will be able to answer all your questions,
Okay.
hopefully.
Right, all the questions, but right now we can tell you just, and this has been the discussion, that with 3 buildings, not only can we provide space for the auditor for elections, but we can also move both records and facilities out of leased space into those buildings as those leases expire.
Right, that's what, but I know we've had those
Right.
discussions, but does that solve the problem for facilities for a location, for
Yes.
records for a location? Does it
Yes.
take care of all that? And is there 10,000 feet left that can be utilized?
That's what the design guy's
Okay.
gonna tell us.
Okay,
Although I'll tell you that Mary wants,
what's the whole thing?
she wants 2 whole buildings.
Well, and I'm not,
And she can't have that much and have us accommodate facilities and records. So
okay.
we're gonna use it all.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
But
Yeah.
but we're saying that in the event that we have additional extra space, then the option for the board will be to, if
Yeah,
there's
what else could
to
we
bring another function of the county or lease it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're suggesting, if there's
Well, we
anything left.
We can't lease it because we're gonna use bond money to buy it
Oh,
ultimately. So the leasing we're doing right now has to be, we've gotta work our way out of those leases and that'll probably consume anyway,
The maximum.
that's into the weeds,
Yeah.
but yeah.
the percentage of,
Yeah.
got it.
Anyway, yes, we'll have a long-term plan for that building for you soon. Anything else come to mind as we work through these things? Those were the 2 items that I wanted to not leave behind. Website, Hopefully that'll be part of the ARP money you have. It's on my list for ARP to propose to the board, but I'll put it up here just to make sure it's not left behind.
Yeah, that's.
Hello? Yeah, we're close to wrapping up.
I mean, since we have a couple of minutes, I mean, I doubt it would have changed my position, but it would have been better to have known the extent of Mary's, needs prior to the board deciding to buy the building, given that we had, that high level weighing of the dollars and cents.
I think she was surprised by the price tag, which is again why we want a design person, an actual design person. She walked through with Jason and Chris, just doing some high level stuff, and their eyes kind of popped, and we've got to get a real person who can do some real estimates, and figure out what does she really want and what can we afford of that.
Yeah, so good point.
Okay, well, that was fruitful,
All right,
and we'll be back in 5 minutes for Commissioner check-in.
Executive session to begin.
Before we totally break, I'm gonna turn to the budget team. Are any of you thinking of, did I miss anything on the lists we've been keeping? No, we've pretty much covered everything. All right, oh, Denise, yes.
Road diversion.
Still can't hear you.
Is she muted?
Road diversion.
Can you start?
Road diversion,
Can you start from the beginning? We missed the first part.
road diversion.
Mhm.
Yep, thank you. We'll make sure that that's a steady reduction in road diversion.
Romero, you don't happen to know what's going on down there on that Jake Break place by Tenino, do you? There's a lot of construction going on right there at that
Within
intersection.
the city of Tenino, no, I don't know.
Anything
I don't
else,
think
ladies?
It's in the city. I mean, it's not in the city, it's in the county. I just wondered if you knew.
Pretty
No,
much covered
no,
it. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, this meeting is adjourned.
Yep, great.